very happy to be able to introduce the session on the Deep Space Food Challenge and insights into the future of food production systems. I just want to start by maybe providing a little bit of perspective on why we thought this was such an interesting and important session to have for the group. For those of you who remember way back when we first put the space programs in place, Kara and I may be the only ones here who do, but there were a number of technologies from space that were brought back to Earth. And those technologies were developed mainly for space, but they found Earth-based applications. A few of those are things like freeze-dried foods that were developed at the time for space travel. Fireproof materials that were developed after the Apollo 1 disaster, which are now used by firefighters all around the world. There was water filtration systems that were developed, again, for use in space that are now the kinds of things that everybody takes on a camping trip with them. Wireless headsets were developed as part of the technology for the Apollo program. Car tires that now don't puncture were developed for the lunar landers, because you can imagine AAA doesn't come to the moon. So a flat tire on the moon would have been a big problem. And so that technology was brought back to Earth. And in talking with the group last night as we were preparing for the meeting today, I think one of the observations, I think, Ralph, it was that you made, was that it's now bidirectional. It's not only technology developed for space to be brought back to Earth, but Earth technologies and how we can adapt them to extraterrestrial challenges. And if you think about some of the things that have to be addressed as we think about food production off the planet, the harsh climate that has to be dealt with, whether it's on Mars or whether it's in the space capsule itself, is really an extension of all the work that's happening with climate change. Our climate is becoming more harsh. Now, it's not as harsh as it's going to be on Mars, but it's certainly harsher than it has been for the past 50 years. And so I think this is something that gives us an opportunity to think about how these challenges that we're seeing today can be addressed, and how the food challenges that the different space agencies are going to talk about can be applied to our business. And I think that's something we should keep in mind as we go through this. HACCP, by the way, is another thing that was developed for space that's being used today pretty much as a matter of course for everything that goes on in the food industry. So I think there's a lot of relevance to what we're going to hear, and besides, this is fun and interesting. So now we'll boldly go where no person has gone before, and we'll see how the future fits in for the present. And with that, let me turn it over to Leila to introduce the first speaker, and then we'll get into this. We'll do our questions and answers as a panel after the presentations, and we have the afternoon to talk about this. Very excited about this session, so please join us for this.
Oh, I don't need it. Yeah, thank you, Todd. So I'll be introducing the speakers. Just a brief introduction about myself. I'm a member of the ILSI US and Canada Science Board and the ILSI Scientific Program Committee. I also served as a judge for the first two phases of the Deep Space Food Challenge, which was sort of my connection to the challenge. As Todd has mentioned, the Deep Space Food Challenge is designed to foster the development of sustainable food production technologies or systems that require minimal, and this is, I think, very important, minimal resource inputs to create safe, nutritious, and palatable food. So that's the outcome. We want safe, nutritious, whatever the technologies, it must be safe, nutritious, and palatable for long-duration extraterrestrial missions. So while the challenge is designed to meet the specific needs of the space agencies, as Todd has mentioned, there's great applications with these technologies that benefit people on Earth. So in the first session, which is before the break, you will hear from the representatives from the three space agencies, USA, Canada, and Europe, who will talk about the challenge and their agencies' programs to meet the food needs of astronauts embarking on future missions. And what should be very obvious for you from the presenters in the first session and in the second half is that all of these people work very closely together to meet the needs to support this goal. So in the second half, you will hear from two companies who were winners of phase 2 of the competition. So they will present their innovations, what they're doing for the challenge, and more importantly, what are they doing beyond the challenge to meet the food security needs on Earth. And that will be then followed by at least a minimum of a 30-minute discussion led by Todd. So we will discuss about the deployment and application of these technologies. So as Todd mentioned, we will take a few questions after each presentation because there'll be plenty of time for you to ask your questions during the discussion session. Now, one of the things I like to ask presenters to do, which put me a little bit on a spot, is to say something about yourself that you wouldn't put in a resume. So I kept thinking, now we've asked the speakers to do that, what am I going to say? So I thought you probably noticed that my name is spelled Leila, but it's pronounced Leela, which is sort of a little bit confusing. And the reason for that is my mother had a very good Hindu friend who was Leila, and I'm Catholic, and my father said, why are we giving our daughter a Hindu name when we're Catholic? So they compromised, and I have a name that's spelled the Western way, but it's pronounced the Hindu way. So if you wonder why I'm confused sometimes, it's because my parents were also a little bit confused. So with that, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. My introductions will be short. As you know, not only can you look them up by scanning the ILSI app, every single one of our speakers are on LinkedIn. So we do invite you to go on LinkedIn to look up the speakers.